Chapter 7. Tom felt terrible. He told himself that he had no friends and nobody loved him. He had tried to do right, but they didn't let him. If they don't want him, let it be so. And let them blame him for his troubles. Why shouldn't they? What right had the poor boy, without any friends, to complain? Yes, they had forced him to it at last. He would leave the town and become a pirate. There was no choice. By this time, he was far down Meadow Lane, and the bell for school rang. He sobbed, now, to think he would never, never hear that sound any more. It was very hard. But they forced him to it. He had to go into the cold world. But he forgave them. The sobs came fast. Just then, he saw his best friend, Joe Harper. Joe was unhappy too. Clearly, here were two souls with a single thought. Tom, wiping his eyes with his sleeve, began to say something about his decision to leave home, because his life was hard and he had no friends. He said he wanted to go away into the great world and never return. Tom ended by hoping that Joe would not forget him. But it happened that Joe had come to see him for the same reason. His mother had whipped him for drinking some cream, which he had never seen. She was clearly tired of him and wished him to go. If she felt that way, there was nothing for him to do but leave. He hoped she would be happy and never feel sorry for her poor boy, who would suffer and die far from his family. As the two boys walked sad and unhappy together, they decided to help each other and be like brothers. Then they began to think about their plans. Joe wanted to live on bread and water in the wood and die sometime of cold and suffering. But after listening to Tom, he agreed to join his friend as a pirate too. 3 miles below St. Petersburg, at a point where the Mississippi River was just a mile wide, there was a long, narrow island called Jackson's Island. It wasn't big, but it had a forest, and no one ever went there. So they chose to live there. Then they found Huckleberry Finn, and he joined them. He had nothing against becoming a pirate either. Then all the boys agreed to meet at midnight on the bank of the river, 2 miles above the town. There was a small log raft there, which they wanted to take. Each would bring hooks and lines, and some food which they could steal in the most dark and mysterious way, just like pirates. About midnight, Tom arrived with a piece of ham and a few more things, and stopped not far from the meeting place. There were a great number of stars in the sky. It was very quiet. The river was more like an ocean. Tom listened a moment, but heard no sounds. Then he whistled. The whistle was answered from under the hill. Tom whistled twice more. These signals were answered in the same way. When the pirates met, they saw what things they had with them. Joe brought a big piece of bacon and was tired of carrying it that far. Huck had stolen a frying pan and some bread. Tom said they would need some fire. That was a wise thought. Matches were not often used in those days. They saw a fire on a great raft 100 yards above, and they went there and stole a burning hot piece of wood. They made adventure of it, saying "hist" from time to time, and giving orders in whispers. The boys knew very well that the raftsmen were all down at the town, but it was important to do these things like real pirates. They found the raft and started their journey. Tom was in command, Huck and Joe at the oars. Tom stood in the middle of the raft and gave the orders, which were given only for style and didn't mean anything in particular. Soon, the raft was passing the town. 2 or 3 lights showed where it was, peacefully sleeping. Tom stood looking at the place where he had been happy and sad and wishing she could see him now on the sea, going to death with a smile on his lips. The other pirates were busy looking at the town too. They all looked so long that they nearly passed Jackson's Island. They discovered the danger in time and turned the raft to it. About 2 o'clock in the morning the boys landed. They used an old sail they had found on the raft to make a tent for their things, but they decided to sleep in the open air in good weather, as pirates do. Then they made a fire and cooked some bacon in the frying pan for supper. They sat around the fire, very satisfied with themselves and their adventure, and they said they would never return to civilization. "Isn't it fun?" said Joe. "It's great," said Tom. "What would the boys say if they could see us?" "Say? Well, they'd just die to be here." "I like it here," said Huckleberry. "I want nothing better than this. I don't get enough to eat sometimes, and they can't come and take me." "It's just the life for me," said Tom. "You don't have to get up in the morning, and you don't have to go to school and wash, and all those foolish things." "Oh, yes," said Joe. "I'd rather be a pirate, now that I've tried it." "You see," said Tom, "a pirate is always respected." Huck said, "What does pirates have to do?" Tom said, "Oh, they have a good time. They take ships and burn them, and get the money, and bury it on islands where ghosts can watch it. And they kill everybody in the ships." "And they bring the women to the island," said Joe. "They don't kill the women." "No," agreed Tom. "They don't kill the women. They're too noble. And the women are always beautiful, too. And they don't wear clothes like we do." "Oh, no, all gold and silver and diamonds," said Joe with enthusiasm. "Who?" said Huck. "The pirates." Huck studied his own clothes. "I think I'm not dressed to be a pirate," he said sadly. "But I have nothing else." But the other boys told him that fine clothes would come very soon, after they began their adventures. They made him understand that his poor rags would do to begin with. Finally their talk stopped, and the boys fell asleep by the fire, and so none of them noticed that their raft moved down on the sand towards the river, and soon was floating down the Mississippi. When Tom woke up early in the morning, he wondered where he was. He sat up and rubbed his eyes and looked around. Then he thought about their adventure. He looked at the fire. A thin blue breath of smoke rose straight into the air. Joe and Huck still slept. Far away in the woods, a bird called. Another answered. Soon there were sounds of birds everywhere. Tom had never before seen so many insects and animals, and they were not afraid of him at all. When the other pirates woke up, they all ran to the river for a swim. They felt no wish to return to the little town that was still sleeping on the other bank of the Mississippi. The boys found that their raft had disappeared, but they were not unhappy about it. They didn't want to go back home anyway. They came back to the camp happy and hungry. They made the campfire again. Huck found a spring of clear cold water, and the boys made cups of broad leaves and felt that they could easily drink that sweet water instead of coffee. Tom and Huck caught some fish and fried the fish with the bacon. The fish had never seemed so good before. They did not know that the fish is the best when it is cooked after it is caught. They also never thought that food could be much better after sleeping in the open air and a lot of bathing. After breakfast, the boys went off through the woods on an expedition. They found many interesting things. They discovered that the island was about 3 miles long and 1/4 mile wide, and it was separated from the far bank of the river by a narrow channel, hardly 200 yards wide. They took a swim about every hour, and it was the middle of the afternoon when they got back to camp. They were too hungry to stop to fish, and they ate cold ham, and then lay down to talk. But the talk soon stopped. They began to feel lonely. But none of the pirates wanted to show his weakness, and no one of them was brave enough to speak about his thoughts. Suddenly, they heard a strange sound from the direction of the town. The boys looked at each other. "What is it?" said Joe. "I don't know," said Tom in a whisper. "Let's go and see." They ran to the other side of the island to see what was happening. They saw a little steamboat about a mile below the town. The deck of the ship seemed crowded with people. There were many small boats, too. It seemed like the men in them were looking for something in the river. Then the steamboat made that sound again. "I know now," exclaimed Tom. "Somebody is drowned." "That's it," said Huck. "They were doing the same thing last summer when Bill Turner drowned." Then a thought ran through Tom's head. "Boys," he cried, "I know who's drowned. It's us." They felt like heroes. It was a great triumph. People finally missed them, talked about them, felt sorry for all the bad things they had thought about them. The boys felt it was the best thing about being pirates.